Hello there, everyone. We're going to be getting started really soon. I hope you can hear me. The subject, of course, is how to manage your microbiome gut health tips for the season. So we'll be reviewing most of the science around the gut, giving you a good overview there, and then talking more specifically about the season of the year, some things to watch out for so that you can, well, look and feel great through the festive period and beyond. We've got another minute or so before we're officially going to get started. So grab a cup of tea or a glass of water, whatever you have to hand. I'm speaking to you from London today, and there are some roadworks going on outside, so please don't panic if you hear some odd noise. And Jonathan, lucky Jonathan, is actually in Spain.
Hi there. The Spanish internet is not always as it should be, but it's been working pretty well up until now. So if you do get some buffering on my voice or my video, don't panic. It ought to come back pretty quickly. I think we're getting up to broadcast time. We've got four attendees at the moment. So welcome Daniela, Dawn, Laura and Natalie. I hope you're all well. At the moment we've got you all on mute, but if you want, we're going to be asking for questions later on. So if you'd like to ask a question and would like to tell us about it, then I can switch all those mutes off either singly or together. So I think we're going to run it as a presentation in the first instance, and then we can open it up afterwards if that's okay.
Okay, so we should probably get started because that's just 1 minute past 1 as far as my clock is concerned. Jonathan, do you want to say just a very short few words?
Yeah, sure. Hi, so I'm Jonathan Ebsworth. I'm the CEO and founder of Sense Products, and as I said, coming from Spain at the moment, where the weather's a little bit better than it is in the UK. As far as I'm concerned, I'm visiting my mum for Christmas or pre-Christmas, as I can't get out here at Christmas and the New Year. So we've been spending some time looking at new recipes that she's got going on. She's always very inspiring. She's 80 years old and is the most sprightly 80-year-old that I've ever come across, and is one of my main inspirations for starting Sense in the first place and getting nutritionally online with everything from a diet perspective as well as a supplements perspective. So it's always great to come out and visit and find out what new things she's been looking into at the moment. Surprise, surprise, it's about aging and the fact that aging is not a given, and there's some research coming out from Harvard at the moment that they're considering aging to be a disease that can be cured as opposed to something that we all have to give into. So there's
I think I've read that research actually, Jonathan, and so much of it's going to come from the gut. So we need to talk about the gut because these ladies are going to have not much time on their hands.
This is true. I think it's a guy called Sinclair that's written the latest book on that, so it's worth looking out for.
It is, yeah.
His
we'll do another session on longevity, I think, in the future.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. So, so from my perspective, I had an autoimmune disease that I cured through diet and looking after myself, and part of that cure was recognizing that the gut is the most important organ of the body because it's feeding everything else in terms of nutrition and keeping it going. And the leaky gut syndrome, which is something that I never knew about but can build up over a long period of time, where the stuff in your gut is getting through to your bloodstream and setting off your immune system. So I ended up with a really nasty autoimmune condition that was effectively making me go blind. But after 4 or 5 years on hard drugs, I managed to get off all of those and stop the disease simply through diet and looking after my insides. So that was part of the inspiration for Sense for Gut Health that is now out in the ether. So I've got today, we have Amanda Hamilton, who is a nutritionist, author and broadcaster, particularly the author of a recent book, G-Plan Diet, that was the #1 bestseller on Amazon under the health category. So Amanda really does know her stuff on gut health. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Amanda to take you through the presentation.
Okay, so hello everyone, and I know quite a few people are going to watch and catch up too. So, keep in touch with questions, etc. at the end of the session, as I said. So what we're going to focus on is gut. Let me give you a kind of tour of gut. It's obviously a huge subject in health right now. When I first started 16, 17 years ago in this subject, it was very difficult to motivate people around the subject of gut health. It's a hidden organ. Sometimes people feel embarrassed about talking about gut habits, but certainly, as Jonathan has alluded to, and I'm sure most of you are aware, the impact of your gut health is actually body-wide. So let's just jump on to the next slide, Jonathan, and I'll take you through just some of the highlights of what your gut health can do in terms of the benefits and those things that can go wrong. And then we're going to really focus on what about this season of the year, winter, assuming most of you are in the UK or in cold countries rather than in sunny Spain, where of course the diet can be an awful lot better. Anyway, let's talk about this inside out approach to health. So right back at the very beginning, if you like, Hippocrates, the founding father of modern medicine, stated that all disease begins in the gut, and increasingly sort of bang up to date science is pretty much proving that is the case. As it says there in the slide, increasingly recognized in the scientific community that the human microbiota, by that I mean a collection of different types of microbes or microorganisms that reside principally in the gut. They are throughout the body, but they're most densely in population, if you like, in the gut. And they outnumber your cells by about 10-1 when you take the genetic factors into account. So really sizable amount of microbes that we're talking about that very much work in synergy with your body. And that should be a bit of an indication of how critical they are to your overall health. And just a few of the highlights there. 95% of serotonin is made in the gut. That's partly the link between gut and mood, which is increasingly being looked at as a subject. Digestion, obviously hugely impacted by gut health, isn't it, overall? The immune system, massively important for the gut, not just inside the gut itself, but again, as Jonathan mentioned, this thing called dysbiosis or leaky gut syndrome, where a permeable gut becomes hyperpermeable when substances that shouldn't be passing through the gut wall do into the blood, causing that autoimmune, that immune reaction to kill off a foreign substance, and that creates in and of itself serious illnesses. And the balance of your biome, your microbiome, both directly and indirectly will impact on weight. And that's a subject I wrote about quite extensively in my last book. So keep going, let's go into the next highlight. So just kind of, this is quick summaries really to what we're talking about when we're talking about gut health, because obviously the focus here is a little bit on winter and this season and things changing over season, but it's important to big up the why, if you like, let you really understand and get motivated by the subject of gut health if you're not already there. So it impacts your immune system. We know that in winter in particular, what happens is people come closer together in crowded spaces, not covering their mouths, coughing. We're literally more prone to picking things up because we're in closer contact with other individuals. But there might be other factors too, clearly. Diet might not be as good. You might be drinking too much, sleeping less, a whole bunch of other things. Weight gain, obesity, I mentioned that before. Disease risk, inflammation is, you could think about that like a kind of pre-disease state. Food intolerances and allergies obviously on the rise, and very much linked to the overall gut health. Diabetes indirectly linked to gut health. Skin issues, now that's a very strange one because a lot of people don't understand that link, and again it comes down to that barrier, the gut health barrier, or the gut lining not working as it should. So lots and lots of kind of total body impact from gut health. But when it comes to this season, there's the why. So it's not just a case of having a flatter tummy through Christmas and New Year. It's much more about feeling well, supporting and driving health outcomes from the inside out, as I said right at the very beginning. But of course, at this time of year, we are surrounded, really kind of from probably this day onwards, I'm sure some of you are in your office parties coming up soon, that kind of thing, by beige food, so processed refined carbohydrates, which are particularly disruptive for gut health. Not only is gluten quite hard to digest, even if, I'm not talking about someone with celiac disease, which clearly has a very specific issue with gluten. I'm talking about that category of foods overall is unhelpful for the gut. Now, that does not mean that if you have a bowl of porridge, you're going to suffer at all. It's nothing like that. What I'm saying is, through this season of the year, there tends to be a real increase in the consumption of the processed food category. Not only is that just hard to digest by the very nature of it, but it is depleted in the nutrients that we require. And often it contains fundamentally sort of toxins, so added ingredients that, although we can handle, of course our body can process things, it's much more about, think about it like an increasing workload. And when it's something foreign that your body's having to process, so say a chemical, try and read the back of a food label, again, these things are safe. It is just that when it comes to something that is unnatural like that, fundamentally in terms of how our guts have evolved and how we've evolved, then of course it adds work. Then there's the sugar. Then there's the increase in sugar intake. And again, sugar is a significant disruptor of gut health. We have evolved over many, many, many years without having a high percentage at all of what's known as free sugar in our diet. So excess sugar is disruptive. And of course, processed food is where you're going to get a significant amount of that. So just think about that when the canapes come around on that tray, or indeed the cocktails and the seasonal drinks, which are just kind of liquid sugar really. So starting to think about what you're eating at this time of year. What I would say, just to kind of dig into the detail of that, what actually goes on. So it's quite easy to think about those foods and think, oh, well, they make me bloated, or I'm 5 pounds heavier after Christmas, what happened? Let's just look at actually what is happening when you have that type of food. So your bacteria in the gut will rebalance or shift or modulate according to what the change in your diet. In fact, the change in diet and the impact in the gut microbes is really quite quick, much quicker than you may expect. So even within 24 hours, for example, of switching to a more plant-based diet, that doesn't mean vegan or vegetarian, just a high percentage of plants in my speak, then it can, oh, I can't see the presentation anymore, Jonathan.
Okay, is it gone?
I'll just carry on because I can remember it, I'm sure. But what I'm saying there is that very quickly, even within 24 hours of shifting to a more plant-based diet, the microbes balance will also change. In other words, the balance of the microbes in your gut do follow a change in diet. You are the controller of what's going on in terms of gut health. They will react to what you do. But the bad bacteria that we don't want to proliferate in the gut, because they can actually create something called an endotoxin, so something that is created from the inside of the body rather than exotoxin from outside. And think about it like an internal pollutant that then can trigger a cascade of reactions which can result in that autoimmune trigger, so your body having to attack something that's a foreign substance. But also, if you're looking at something like sugar, for example, then we're looking at a spike in insulin, when we have a spike in insulin over a period of time, if you've had a diet that's heavily processed, then too much sugar in the blood and not enough insulin sensitivity, which is what dials back with too much processed food over a period of time, and we end up in that situation of called metabolic syndrome. Slightly different category because it's more like diabetes, but everything is interlinked, and inflammation is thought to be triggered from the gut level onwards. I can't see the presentation, Jonathan, so
Okay. Let me see if I'll see if I can reshare it.
So what we're looking at then is the food that we increase over this time of year is on so many levels disruptive to gut health. If you are ill and sick at this time of year, as people are more prone to, if you require antibiotics, they are marvelous, miraculous medicine. I would never ever say that that's something that is not a kind of great advance in the modern age. But what I would say is that the latest research that I have read on antibiotics and how long it takes for your body, your microbiome to repair itself or rebalance, if you think about it in those terms, is 6 months after a course of antibiotics. So if you don't need them, don't take them, because that balance of microbes is really important. And actually the things that set up that balance, so your gut ecology, your gut biome is different from mine, different from Jonathan's and whoever else you might be in the room with. And that is influenced by your earliest years, the first 2 or 3 years of your life being particularly significant, the mode of birth, and how often you've had things like antibiotics, and what your overall diet is like, what the world around you is like. But as adults, I'm sure it's all adults that are listening now, it's what you put in your mouth day in, day out that really matters. So if you are more prone to being ill at this time of year, think carefully about taking antibiotics and only take them if you need them. Really watch the intake of processed food. Not only, so as I said, high sugar foods, not only will it disrupt the gut, but clearly it also leads to other problems, such as developing insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, weight gain around the middle, all the things that we don't want to do because it's pre-diabetes. It's very common to, at this sort of time of year, to become more of a sort of sofa dweller, watching The Crown on the sofa, just sort of chilling out. The weather's terrible today, it's terrible. You don't want to be out and about as much. And exercise is actually a really wonderful way to support our gut health. Exercise boosts the level of something called butyrate, short chain fatty acids, which supports all the facets that kind of make the gut health balance work. So what we want to do is keep moving. There was a great study done on elite athletes showing they have better biomes, microbiomes, than the average person, but you don't need to be in any way an elite athlete to get the benefit of exercise. What I would suggest is keeping walking is one of the simplest ways to get the benefit of exercise and gut health. Clearly, gut health also, in other words, actually just having a bowel movement is supported by exercise too. What I would also say is hydration is really important. It's more common, bizarrely, to be dehydrated in winter than it is in summer. And that's because in summer we see the sunshine, we feel it in our skin, we probably even feel the sweat, we're just more aware. But in winter we can be just as prone to being dehydrated, but because the wind, for example, might wick that moisture away really quickly, we're not sensing it as much. So we're just simply not drinking as much. And then of course, along comes alcohol, which is a diuretic, taking your hydration levels down. That also significantly impacts on the gut transit time. So how long it takes for you to eat something and then to eliminate something. So what we want to do at this time of year is focus on keeping everything moving, both inside the gut and moving your body. We want to think about how to cut down and avoid significantly increasing our intake of those kind of beige party foods. And that's as much kind of having a strategy around those things as anything else. Your gut microbes love diversity of diets. So what I would say is that think about putting plants first on the plate. That's where you get your fiber. Fiber is massively important for gut health, and also something called prebiotic fiber. That's the fiber that kind of survives the digestive process and actually acts like a fertilizer for the good bacteria. And you'll get that from all different types of vegetables principally. although you'll find it in a banana too, so shove a banana in a smoothie. And what I would say is think about having a good sort of 7 or 8 portions of different vegetables a day. That might sound incredibly high to you, but if you throw a bit of spinach in a smoothie, if you have soups, stews, salads, all that kind of stuff, you'll find that quite easily you can get to 7 or 8 different types of vegetables. Because naturally you're going to want stodgier, starchier, more kind of carbohydrate type foods at this time of year, comfort foods if you like. That can also come from things like soups and stews. It doesn't need to come from pastries and muffins. So just think about that a little bit.
How are you doing with the presentation, Amanda? Are you still off?
Yeah, I can now see it. But
right.
Because I was going to go in free flow, I've done through some of this already.
Yeah,
but I will just pick up on this slide. Is that the kind of follow-on story to that one I was talking about with insulin is that inflammation that happens at the gut level also triggers an overproduction of insulin. Those of you that have heard of insulin resistance, that's what I was mentioning earlier on, also tells your body to stop burning fat and instead to start storing it, and that's when you get the weight gain around the middle. So it's very much the gut balance impacts on, as I said, not just weight indirectly, but actually is, well, the research shows that the microbial balance in your gut really significantly impacts on things like your likelihood of obesity. So it's not the only factor, but it's something serious to consider. You're jumping around the slides. I can't see where I've now got all the slides on the page at the same time.
Sorry.
This is the first time we've done this sort of professionally, so apologies for that. What this slide shows is just a summary. This will be the kind of last bit on the science piece, if you like, the summary of the interactions between your microbes and you, the host. So all the factors that influence the gut in the first place. So your diet composition being the kind of one that you are fundamentally in control of. What you put in your mouth, what you eat and drink is going to have a really significant effect on those microbes. And bear in mind, some microbes only last 20 minutes. Within 24 hours, you can start to have an impact on the balance of microbes in your gut because they will follow the food that you eat, not the other way around. Your feeding patterns. So it can be helpful at this time of year to make sure that you leave enough non-eating gaps. So you might have heard something called fasting or intermittent fasting. Personally, I always find that at this time of year when the food is a bit richer and kind of is, I don't know, all the social cues are there to eat more than you might normally and drink more than you might normally, it can be helpful just to extend the non-eating window to let your body deal with it as much as anything else. So for example, the minimum time restricted feeding hours would be, say 12 hours. So 8 o'clock at night and then you eat the next morning, 12 hours later. If you can extend it up to 13, 14 hours, for example, the upper limit being about 16 hours. In other words, you skip a meal and let your body deal with what it consumed the night before. This is very safe, simple ways of giving your gut the rest, but also giving your overall kind of metabolism the rest too. And it's an effective fat loss strategy as well. What I would say is if you're listening and you're somebody that suffers from diabetes, obviously the different category there. If you are someone, if you're a woman and you're on a different stage of your menstrual cycle, so typically just before menstruation, you tend to need 3 meals a day, protein-based, ideally. But what I would say is that when it comes to this season, it can be helpful to extend the non-eating window, allowing your gut and the rest of the body to kind of catch up with the different the change in food and feeding patterns. Your genetics obviously plays a significant factor in everything, but we often say in kind of health circles that genetic loads the gun and it's lifestyle that will fire it. Genetics are more like, your genes are more like a kind of series of light bulbs that you switch on and off according to lifestyle factors. In other words, you're still in control. Most of the time you're still in control. You'll see there that it refers to things like childbirth, delivery method. All that impacts on the very earliest setup of your microbes because that is the first inoculation excuse me, of bacteria. passing through the birth canal. So there is a different microbiome from someone that has been born by C-section to somebody that is born through the birth canal. Now, these are just factors that clearly we can't have anything to do with. It's just something that happens. Then what I would say, yeah.
Shall I give you a rest for a second, Amanda? I've got an interactive bit that I'd like to launch. So we're going to ask a very simple yes or no question, just to see the audience we have today, and perhaps we can gear any answers that come through on questions to this. So I'm going to ask a question, and it's a simple yes or no. Do you suffer currently from any gut issues? This is an anonymous poll that we're running, and we'll come to it at the end when Amanda's finished the presentation. But I thought I'd just interject and give you a bit of a rest, Amanda, and let's see if the technology works.
Exactly.
If you could answer yes or no, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Coming through now.
It won't come through in Spanish. It'll come through. Oh yeah, I've got it. Oh, I got it. Do I currently suffer from any gut issues? There you go. Oh, host and panelists can't vote. I can't vote. So I hope everyone else votes. Right. You can pop on to the next screen.
Okay. Well, actually, we've got everybody's come through, and it's 100% yes. So we know the audience we're dealing with. So thanks for letting us know, everybody.
That's great. Okay. So if you can hop on to the next slide.
Yeah.
So now that I know that, it is very helpful actually. What I would say is that when you're looking at gut health, there are some absolute rules in terms of diet and lifestyle factors. So for example, the movement, stress is an independent modulator of the gut. So if you're stressed, again, something that happens more at this time of year, typically, not exclusively, but typically, that will disrupt the gut and actually even the microbial balance, no matter what else you do. So it's a fact that has to be considered. But kind of when I'm dealing with things clinically, what I would say is it's always really good to tailor things as personally as you can, because sometimes the issue is something relating to stomach acid, sometimes it's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which requires a kind of medical test that uses the breath. Sometimes it's much more of a gut issue that requires a stool test to identify. There's a whole bunch of things that can go on to be very precise about it. But usually what I found in practice is helping people get that next stage of health when it comes to the gut. There are some very common factors and simple things that you can all do that will hopefully make a really significant difference. We can kind of get into that at the end of the presentation. So this is really just kind of painting that picture of processed food, too much sugar, what's going on, and showing that the gut is involved. It's not the only factor, of course, but ultimately it's really something to consider. So if we pop on to the next slide, if you don't mind, Jonathan.
Sorry, there you go. Takes about 10 clicks on this at the moment. Maybe it's the Spanish buffering. Who knows?
Okay, so in summary, then, getting kind of gut savvy or really focusing on your gut health this season, what does it really help to do? So nutrition planning, that is thinking about what it is you're going to do. Is it office parties? Is it parties? Is it cooking for 25 people? Whatever it might be, and how can you make it work for you? And I think a lot of the time that's about not being so kind of British and polite and saying no if you mean no, pre-planning, making sure you eat well as much of the time as you can. It's very easy to sort of slide into a way of eating that you might not be comfortable with, and certainly your gut can suffer with, just because you're kind of keeping everyone else around you happy. So I would say prioritize your own inner health through the season. The good thing is gut healthy foods are much more widely available. Something like kombucha, which is fermented tea, sounds disgusting if you've not tried it, but it is sort of fizzy and it comes in a can. The lower sugar ones are better. But I would say that looks like kind of a nice adult drink. So if you're thinking, oh, alcohol really irritates my gut, and actually the sugar will definitely disrupt the gut anyway, I don't want to have a hangover, I don't want to feel like that, you can have these completely alcohol-free drinks that are incredibly good for the gut. So fermented drinks like that contain diverse beneficial bacteria, Yeah, incredibly nourishing, and they're available in bars now. Kombucha is called. You might find that that's something you could do to help with nutrition planning this season. Keeping moving, I mentioned that the athletes are people that exercise and move more, have healthier guts, better microbiomes or healthier microbiome diversity. So keep moving, make sure you get out, you walk, ideally outdoors. Think about also taking some shortcuts, and this is where the likes of Sense comes in. So if you get a proper grade of supplement or concentrate, like a kind of food grade supplement like this one, then adding it into a smoothie, adding it into what you're already doing to get what is difficult to get diet alone, and take those shortcuts because they're available to us, and it's a great product. So have a little think about that, and do manage your stress levels. As I said right back 15 minutes ago, stress is what's known as an independent modulator of the gut. No matter what else you do, if you're completely stressed out your mind, then it is going to impact on your overall gut health. So do think about how to manage that. And usually keeping moving, exercise is a great stress reliever, boosts your endorphins, makes you feel good. So it all, of course, it's like this whole circle. Nothing happens in isolation, and no more so than when we talk about gut health, because of course, not only is it not isolated, but it impacts on everything else as well. So really a kind of critical part of your health to get right. The other things I would say is eating habits. So because you're eating in social groups, typically at this time of year, it's very common to eat more when you're eating in social groups, but also maybe not chew as well. And if you don't chew as well, then that can trigger digestive upset later on, or digestive issues or struggles, if you like, later on, because you just want to break down the food properly. So try not to do that, and try and slow down the whole process, and enjoy and savor the food when you have it. That will also help with digestion. Do you want to move the next slide on, Jonathan?
Doing the next one on from there.
Yep. So this is about
nutrition planning, and then
then you can pop back to that. Okay.
Do you want the previous one?
Yeah, so give me the next one, and then you can pop. So other things. So if you do suffer from bloating, or something like an IBS type symptom, it's from the stage 1, if you like, is eliminating common gut irritants. And by that, I mean things like wheat, maybe dairy, depending on your background, genetic background, principally. And remember that as we age, things do change. So we start to lose, for example, levels of lactase, the enzyme that helps to digest lactose will diminish as we age typically. So things that might have been okay 20 years ago might not be okay now. Keeping things simple. I would say that soup is super helpful, super helpful at this time of year, not just because it's a good way to get your nutrients. It's also a great way to help you feel a bit fuller for longer. Something called bone broth, you might have come across it, has been shown to have beneficial effects on the gut. So you can add that as a stock. You can buy it online, or you can make it at home yourself. Healthier carbohydrates is really kind of mission critical to surviving the season when it comes to digestive health. What I would say is just too many carbohydrates are unhelpful on so many levels when it comes to health. But thinking about the quality of bread, for example, make it sourdough, make it rye, make it something easy to digest. Just don't go down that heavily processed beige food category. You'll pay the price. And then if we go back to the Sense powder, Jonathan, maybe you can give them some highlights in terms of the making life easier, taking shortcuts, which I'm all for, I've got to say. I think we've got to try and make it easier for people, let alone, especially with a subject like gut health, which is very complex. So over to you, Jonathan, to talk about Sense powder.
Yes, well, we have 2 formats for gut health, and I mentioned this.
We're buffering, by the way.
Sorry? So we're the 2.
They're just buffering a little bit.
Oh, I see. So can you hear me okay? Is that better? So hopefully, I just came up on my screen that it was slightly unstable, so it's gone away now. So hopefully that's fine. So Sense for gut health, as I said, the inspiration was really my own autoimmune condition, which um, it really opened my eyes to leaky gut syndrome, where the gut becomes damaged and the gut membrane and the wall allows particles through into the bloodstream, and your immune system is 70–80% around your gut. And therefore, I think Amanda, I'll take this from Amanda because she explained this really well. It's a bit like an airport radar system where you walk through the scanner and you go through, a couple of times and you're fine, and then the third person sets it off. So my gut was damaged. It was allowing particles through, and eventually my immune system went into overdrive because it was just getting too much to deal with, and you end up with an autoimmune condition. So gut health, Sense for Gut Health is really an inspiration from that, and what I did in order to cure my condition was to focus on the bacteria, so making the good bacteria stronger and killing the bad bacteria as much as possible. And so one of the main thrusts of gut health, the product, was to ensure that it had sufficient ingredients in it that would feed the good bacteria, so resistant starches like psyllium husk, and also at the same time kill the bad bacteria using things like garlic and oregano and rosemary, all natural products that will balance the gut bacteria as well as you can using natural ingredients. And some of the vitamins and minerals as well. Calcium, you wouldn't think was necessarily one of the big building blocks for the gut, but it is, and supports the normal function of your digestive enzymes, and also general vitamins A and B2 support the gut wall, the mucous membranes around the gut, that ensures that those particles that shouldn't get through don't get through into your bloodstream. Now, the way in which we have formulated this means that, and it's very much the way that I use supplements, is to have powders that go into smoothies or go into your breakfast cereals, or into any other food for that matter, so they can be used in a very diverse fashion. But because of the high density of nutrients in the products, taste becomes an issue, and so we have to think very hard about what taste would mask some of the not very pleasant tasting minerals in the product. And so we've come up with a relatively savory, slightly spicy with cinnamon tasting product that has quite a high level of resistant starch, which is cacao, which is the unprocessed version of chocolate. And it is a taste that is slightly Marmite like, if I can explain it like that. Some people love it, some people hate it. And so we also produce a capsule that means that if you are slightly sensitive to taste, and a lot of people are, then you can take it in capsule form as well. The great thing about the powders is they have a whole range of superfoods in them that are targeted specifically at gut health. So you not only get the vitamins, minerals that you get in the capsules, you get a whole load of superfoods as well, which make the Sense products unique, because they are this mix of superfood and supplements that really pack a punch in terms of nutrition density, and has a real effect on whoever's taking them. So hopefully that explains the methodology behind how we put together gut health.
Okay, so I think it'd be clearly, given everyone answered yes to current gut issues, if you don't mind, why don't we see if we can open up to Q&A at this point, because I have the feeling that that's might be the best use of your time. I know that we're already at 35 minutes. So why don't we see?
What I'm going to do, Amanda, is because I think we've got five participants on, so I'm going to actually unmute everybody, as I said I might in the start, so that we can hear questions from anybody. And I'm going to kick it off, if I might. I don't know. Can everybody hear? Or does everybody have a microphone that's available? Certainly, you don't have to speak if you don't want to. But if anybody wants to chip in with a question, I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions of my own to Amanda in the first instance. Hi, is that Dawn and Fiona?
Yes.
Oh, hi. How are you?
Okay.
Okay. And hi, Dawn. How are you? Okay. No.
Microphone is not available. I see it.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I can see that. That's fine. So, well, let me kick off the question. So, I've got a really bad habit, Amanda, of coming in late from the office and eating late. So, I'd be really interested to hear if you've got any tips about why eating late is, in the first instance, not great as an idea, and perhaps any tips about how to try and avoid doing that.
Okay, so in terms of eating late, it's often talked about as it's not great for weight gain. That's less of a consideration in reality. It's much more about the fact that when you are asleep, what your body is supposed to be doing, if you like, is the to-do list from the day, the rest and repair phase, if you like. If you are eating late, especially if it's something that's hard work to digest and assimilate nutrients from and detoxify, then you're keeping your body very busy when it should be getting on with the kind of general housework, if you like, with very busy and active managing all the processes that go into digesting and dealing with that. What that then does is it interferes with the quality of sleep. So it's not necessarily about the quantity of sleep, it's quality of sleep. So not only can it disrupt digestion and then have a knock-on effect on the rest of the body in other ways, but it can also diminish the quality of sleep. And as we all know, when you have less quality of sleep, you wake up in the morning, you're still tired, you don't tend to reach for the best food choices when you're tired. So it's much more about the overall cycle. What I would say also is disrupting the circadian rhythm has really significant impact on health, actually. So it's really good to try to stick to a regular bedtime, try and aim for between 8, even a little bit more hours of sleep. Probably 7 to 9 is about kind of the average healthy amount of sleep. A lot of people don't get that. So anything that you can do to support healthy sleep really matters. If you find that you have to eat late because you're coming in late from work or just planning or life factors, then what I would say is it can be helpful to try and eat something around 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and then again keep it very light. So that's where things like soups come in so handy. Personally, what I do late at night is just, if I'm going to eat something that's like a little bit of porridge, something super simple to digest, that's still hearty and warming and sort of sustaining, so you don't get hungry in the middle of the night, but keep it light and simple. And of course, that is the polar opposite of what happens on a Christmas night out, which is precisely why we're having this conversation in December. So there you go. Just eat earlier. If you can, clearly take a walk after dinner. You're in Spain. That's what happens down there. But it's more about that. It's about quality of sleep, disrupting your body processes by focusing your digestive system having to kind of kick in at a time that's not natural to kick in, etc.
Okay, that's
It
great.
can also be bad for heartburn, but that's a slightly different issue.
So Dawn has come up with a question on the Q&A. I regularly have a porridge or overnight oats for breakfast. Are oats a quote good carb unquote?
Depends on your current situation. So generally, absolutely. They are probably one of the best grains out there. They contain beta glucan, which is a particularly good fiber that helps to lower harmful cholesterol. Like they're just overall kind of gold star type situation. What I would say though is that if you are someone that has had a diet that's high in carbohydrates in general, and you're someone that after you eat porridge you are full for a little while and then really hungry again, like a couple of hours after, then often what I do in practice is I take people to a protein-based breakfast, lunch, dinner, and take out even something as healthy as protein, as porridge for a while, just because they're reacting in the kind of harmful way to just too many carbs in the diet. So the whole insulin resistance sequence has kicked off. So if from the majority of people, porridge is a fantastic option. What I would say is you've got to think about what's going on it and in it. So using good quality ingredients for those factors, really important. Also, what I would suggest is think about other ways of getting some extra nutrients in. So whether that's like the sense powder, add some chopped nuts, some chia seeds, think about what you're using as your liquid. Are you using water and milk? Are you using oat milk, or what kind of milk are you using? How are you sweetening it if you need to sweeten it, because oats actually are quite sweet anyway. An overnight oat recipe that I quite like is just with water, oats, and I put like a date or two depending on the quantity in it, and the dates sort of seep into the water, so you get a kind of nice sweet water, but obviously you don't have to eat dates in the end, but it keeps it relatively light as well. Or if you're looking for something that's a little bit more satiating, then adding coconut milk, for example, can be really good. So the much simpler answer to your question is yes, they are healthy, but as a carbohydrate, there are sometimes occasions when even that healthier carb comes out.
Yeah, can I chip in there? Because I was that person who was told not to eat oats, and actually the whole grain family for a while, because of the stress my gut was under when I wasn't well. And but you know what? It was one of the most difficult things that I had to think about when I took grains out of my diet, because particularly for breakfast, where do you go? And I ended up with smoothies that were vegetable based, but high in ground seeds, high in ground nuts, with some coconut oil, which or avocado, that were the energy givers, that contain good fats, and but found it very difficult nonetheless to keep off the oats. I love a bit of porridge for breakfast, I have to say, and although I'm not quite sure where you get oats are quite sweet, Amanda, I generally have to have something in them.
Yeah, well, if you can change someone's palate over a period of time. Yeah, I suppose I don't have particularly a sweet tooth, but this is where it gets very personalized, and I end up answering a question, God save me, like a politician. I'm like, well, there's two answers to that question. Yes, they are, and no, in some cases they're not, and that is the truth of the matter. So just think about, from your point of view, Dawn, you go, okay, do I get hungry quite quickly? Do I kind of crave carbs all the time? Am I feeling kind of a constant gnawing hunger? Am I gaining weight around the middle? Is there a history of type 2 diabetes in my family? Am I constantly looking for something sweet? it can just be a good sort of self-experiment to go, okay, let me try for 1 week to have a different breakfast, try eggs or a smoothie, Greek yogurt if you can have dairy with a few berries in it, just try it out and just move it around. Anything that you do every single day, unless it's vegetable intake, is probably good to rotate anyway, I would suggest. But of course, I eat oats. I think they're really good, delicious. I'm Scottish, so of course I'm going to like oats. But
Yes,
the case stands up, nutritional case stands up for oats. Any other questions coming in? So I know we're almost up at, that's almost 50 minutes. So I realize this is probably, oh, hello, I can see your face, Natalie, how cool. Let's see where we are. I think somebody asked about gallbladder, so can't see the question anymore, but you're looking fat digestion there. More complicated than we can cover in this presentation, but any time where there is a compromise or extra work for the body, whether it's digestion or metabolism or detoxification, then nutrition becomes even more important, because you want to make it easier for your body to do the tasks in hand. And that goes, the same would be apply for someone who's having to take medication, as again, when these things are required, they're required on an ongoing basis, but you just want to give the gut extra work, extra help rather, for the extra work, and your liver the extra support for your work. You want to make sure that the kind of mechanics of how the body is fueled is really kind of abundantly supported, because we're needing our body to do what it needs to do under extra strain and stress. Natalie, do you have a question today? Oh, great. So question about honey. I often get asked this, restrict sugar intake. So when it comes to the different types of free sugars, and by free sugar, what I mean is, so a banana, the fructose, fruit sugar, is in the banana with the fiber, with the prebiotic fiber. When it comes to some prebiotic fiber in a banana, then the fiber slows the release of that sugar down. So although it's sweet, and for some people, you want to just have a little bit of it, it's very different from when you extract that sugar and you have it in the form of alcohol or honey or jam or something like that. Because again, I want you to think about the big picture on this. So we have evolved in such a way that we didn't have free sugars in our diet. We were hunter-gatherers largely. Our only free sugar would have been honey, and it's quite restrictive to get to honey, isn't it, because of all those bees. It's not something that we had in quantity. Our bodies aren't designed to really deal with a high free sugar intake. So what I would say is it's all about quantity. I wouldn't necessarily position honey higher than agave, higher than maple syrup or whatever, unless it's manuka honey or something that's actually antimicrobial, so antibacterial properties, which is more like medicine. So if you're talking about sort of general honey, get the best quality you can. But when it comes to things to sweeten foods, choose what you want to use, so you don't kind of kid yourself thinking, well, this is healthy, I'll just go glug, and just have a really small amount of it. And when you're reading a packet, a label, you're looking at less than 5 grams per 100 grams is low sugar. And guess what? Most things aren't that come in packets. And what you have to watch out for now is that, now that this is quite well understood, that a packet or a label of a food product will often give you the calculation of under 5 grams, but then when you look at the table, it's actually only of 40 grams, not 100 grams. So it's very misleading, because people glance at that and go, oh, look, it's 4 grams, it's fine. I know there's a 5 gram sort of upper limit of what we class as low sugar. It's not. Obviously, then you have to do the maths of, well, that's 40 grams, 2 point something, whatever it ends up being, to make it the right amount. So it's significantly higher in sugar. And that's the kind of breakfast cereal type situation most of the time. So honey is totally fine. Have it if you want it, but just have quite a small amount of it. I would say like a teaspoon is the right serving size of something like honey. And then if you buy the best quality honey you can, just like the best maple syrup you can, which is the one that I like, then you get more flavor from it, and therefore you need to use less. So I hope that helps. Remember also things like spices, things like cinnamon and cardamom, although they're not sweet per se, they seem to help people move away from sweet taste in cooking and baking, because it delivers some of the kind of, vanilla is another one, and delivers some of the kind of qualities of something that's sweet without you having to use something that is hyper sweet.
But if you're trying to move away from substances with high glycemic loads, then the best one to use in cooking or is probably stevia. Would you agree, stevia as the best alternative?
Personally, I don't like the taste, but
No,
it's
not me.
so,
Not me.
yeah. So I think all these things are worth thinking about, but bear in mind that baked goods, so again, we're at that time of year, aren't we, when we're kind of surrounded by these things, but if you were to say, well, a muffin with stevia is going to be X% better than that muffin with sugar, the difference is not that much as long as you're just having a tiny one. So my approach is just have it, but think about it, rather than 5 grams per 100 grams, which of course makes you read lots of labels, it's a 5% gain. It's 5% of your overall intake can be from that category, which is a really small amount. So it's a couple of squares of dark chocolate or chocolate a day. It's maybe a glass of wine every other day. It's a couple of biscuits with a cup of tea with your gran. It's pretty much that. Where we go wrong typically is not, so there's limiting that. There's kind of just having a hardcore limit on those things. And then there is the rest of the food choices, making sure that those carbs are good carbs, because that's where you get a lot of the hidden sugars as well. I mean, I've just, in the fridge over there, you can't see it, but my my man went to this health shop and got like lovely smoothies, and were green at least, with coconut and stuff, so they're fine. And then there was these Snickers bars, like Snickers bars effectively, but it's raw chocolate and dates and honey and whatever, and it's just like a sugar bomb. I mean, seriously, it's probably got as much sugar as a Mars bar. And I'm going, it's just a con, like it's just the same thing wrapped up in slightly healthier packaging. So as far as your body's concerned, the sugar from that type of source, or from just pouring on table, the castor sugar, is virtually no different. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Sugar is sugar as far as what happens in terms of your metabolism is. So have what you want, but just a really small amount of it.
And if you can mask it with some other taste, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, and experiment more with those things. Play around with them. Coconut flour is a good one, I think, because it's really helpful to work with baking. It gives more, I don't know, makes it sort of denser, and it's a sweet-ish type of taste that can work well for those sorts of things. You need less sugar basically with it, but we shouldn't be having too much of those sorts of foods anyway.
Coming off the sugar question, you mentioned in your presentation kombucha, so I was just wondering what other fermented foods. So, because obviously fermented foods, good bacteria, it's good. They're good to focus on as good input to your diet.
Yeah.
What other fermented foods do you recommend people look at?
Okay, so the whole fermented category, what you're looking at is diverse beneficial bacteria, and diversity is one of the keys to the success of them. It doesn't matter which one you have, there's quite a helpful food source, and you'll find in many cuisines and cultures around the world, they just have it as kind of core component of an everyday diet. So we have kefir, which is fermented milk typically, but it can be also coconut milk or water even. So that's like a yogurty type thing with a bit more tang. What I would say with that one is probably the most successful here in the UK. And the warning on that one is that now that it's being done a lot and has become a kind of big industry, and there are brands that are adding sugar, which of course is bad for the microbes. So that's crazy. So what to do is try and make sure that you're getting a good source of it. Plain is generally better than flavored. Then you've got sauerkraut, so the kind of Eastern European cabbage type thing. Not everyone likes that, but it certainly comes with different flavors now. Then you've got kimchi, which is like the Asian version of that. Can be very spicy, really great with sort of fish and noodles and that sort of thing. Then you have kombucha, which is a fermented tea. And then you have other things like fermented miso paste. There's tons, it's a huge category. But one of the best things about it is it's not expensive. You can ferment things yourself if you were so inclined, at no cost whatsoever. I just need a sort of starter grain to starter kit to do it. And
yeah, gherkins are
probiotics right there.
And gherkins are pretty good in fermented. You can get those in jars these days. So actually, though, the four you came up with, the 4Ks: kombucha, kraut, kimchi, and kefir. So that's a good way of remembering them if you're out shopping. If you can pick up one of the 4Ks, which is fermented, you won't be doing yourself any harm at all.
Yeah, you don't have to have them, especially if you already have a healthy gut. But if you're struggling and your gut health is an issue, which it is clearly for a lot of you, what I would say is that it's good to try to weave these things into the diet one way or another. Start small. Don't have if a bottle of kefir is often 150 ml, if not more, just start with 50 ml because it is live beneficial bacteria, and changing the gut is good to do over a small small steps. Again, I don't know you all one-on-one, so I might advise something different if you were sitting in front of me, but that's what I would suggest in kind of more general terms. So if there's any more Q&A, that says up to a full hour, so I know that a lot of you will have to head off, but please, Jonathan's going to be able to send you out, I think, an offer on Sense. Is that right?
Yeah,
Jonathan?
no, that's right. I'm going to put it on the chat right now anyway, so that's just as a thank you for coming on and attending. So if you use this as a discount off your next purchase, there we go. Let me.
And you will find me on, well, let's do Instagram because that's the one everyone's using these days. That's Amanda Nourish is my handle on Instagram, where I'll post about all sorts of things, including gut health. And on Facebook, it is Amanda Hamilton Official. I do respond to questions coming in on that, and I'll certainly, but Sense, you can get in touch with either of us, and I will also pass on any information or questions to Jonathan as well, if you find that that's the best route to get hold of us. There you are. You've got the you've sent that out. That's great.
Yeah, so an email will come through, and if you've got any more questions, just pop them back on that email, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. So it just leaves me to thank Amanda for a great presentation.
Presentation, might I add?
Yeah, indeed. I have to thank the Spanish Wi-Fi authorities for keeping me safe, and from Dawn, thank you for your thanks. And until next time, we're gonna run another seminar in early January about how to start afresh for the new year. So it'll be really great to see all of you then. But until then, thank you, and have a great
Christmas, everyone.
Have a great Christmas and New Year. Bye for now.
Bye.